Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the tumultuous world of Roman emperors, a place where holding the reins of power often meant you were also holding a ticking time bomb. Imagine yourself there, amidst the gilded opulence of the imperial palace, the scent of exotic spices mingling with the faint, metallic tang of fear. You're adorned in purple, the symbol of your absolute authority. But beneath the rich fabric, your heart pounds with the constant awareness that your reign, and indeed your very life, could end with a whisper, a poisoned cup, or the glint of a dagger in the shadows. It's a job where you might just wake up one morning with half your face paralyzed, or find your closest friends whispering about a change of leadership. Trust me, you probably wouldn't survive a week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in an era of unparalleled ambition and unimaginable peril, where the path to supreme power in Rome wasn't just arduous, it was often a death sentence. To even contemplate becoming emperor, you'd need a certain blend of ruthlessness, charisma, and perhaps a touch of madness. Forget your modern-day political campaigns. Here, the stakes were literally life and death. You're not just vying for votes, you're navigating a labyrinth of conspiracies, betrayals, and the ever-present threat of a violent end. Think about it, you. A man of noble birth, perhaps a decorated general, or even a cunning politician, have set your sights on the purple. This isn't a mere aspiration, it's a profound declaration that you are willing to risk everything for the ultimate prize. The journey often begins on the battlefield. You, as a victorious general, returning to Rome with the spoils of war and the adulation of your legions, find yourself in an enviable, yet precarious, position. The common soldier idolizes you, the Senate respects or fears you, and the people cheer your name. This wave of popularity, however, is a double-edged sword. While it elevates you above your peers, it also makes you a target. The reigning emperor, if there is one, views your success with suspicion. Your rivals, always lurking in the shadows, see an opportunity. You walk through the forum, the cheers echoing in your ears, but you can almost feel the eyes on your back, weighing your ambition, judging your next move. Consider the sheer audacity of figures like Julius Caesar. While he never officially held the title of emperor, his story perfectly encapsulates the perils of unchecked ambition. You see him crossing the Rubicon, a point of no return, effectively declaring war on the Republic. It's a move that solidifies his legend, but also seals his fate. He walks into the Senate, a man of immense power, only to be met by the daggers of those who feared his ambition more than they respected his achievements. The scent of fear, then, wasn't just a metaphor. It was a constant, tangible presence in the lives of those who dared to grasp for ultimate power. But it's not just the external threats that define this perilous path. The internal struggle, the constant vigilance required to maintain your position, is equally exhausting. You find yourself surrounded by sycophants and spies. Every friendly face might conceal a traitorous heart. Every casual conversation could be a test. Every gesture misinterpreted. You're forced to cultivate an almost superhuman ability to read people, to discern sincerity from deception, loyalty from feigned devotion. Imagine the mental toll this takes, the constant paranoia gnawing at your sanity. You develop a habit of looking over your shoulder, even in the most private moments. Sleep becomes a luxury, disturbed by nightmares of plots and assassinations. One common historical truth that emerges from this period is the incredibly high turnover rate of emperors. You're not signing up for a long-term career. The average reign was shockingly short, a testament to the inherent instability of the system. It's a job where your retirement plan is often an early grave. You might ascend to the throne on a wave of popular support, only to be dispatched by your own guard a few months later. This brutal reality underscores the fact that power, while intoxicating, was also incredibly volatile. A lesser-known detail, though, is the sheer variety of methods employed to remove an emperor. It wasn't always a dramatic public assassination. Sometimes, it was a slow poison administered over weeks, causing a lingering illness that masked the true cause. Other times, it was a hunting accident or a swimming mishap. You learn quickly that a simple illness could be a ruse, a sudden fall, a deliberate push. The level of cunning and subterfuge involved in these plots is astonishing, a testament to the lengths people would go to seize or control the imperial throne. Historians still debate whether this constant cycle of violence was an inevitable consequence of absolute power in a complex society, or if specific cultural and political factors within Rome exacerbated the problem. Was it the legacy of a republic that never quite adapted to the idea of a single ruler? Was it the immense wealth and power concentrated in one individual, making the prize too tempting to resist? Or was it simply the inherent flaw in human nature, amplified by the opportunities for unchecked ambition and betrayal? These are the questions that continue to puzzle scholars, leaving ample room for your own contemplation as you drift into slumber. You might, for instance, consider the reign of Nero. He inherited an empire, but his own artistic inclinations and increasingly erratic behavior made him unpopular with the Senate and, eventually, the military. You witness his gradual descent into tyranny, the purges, the extravagant displays, the whispers of matricide. His story is a chilling reminder that even an emperor, seemingly omnipotent, can fall victim to his own excesses and the collective will of a populace pushed too far. He wasn't overthrown by a foreign invader. He was abandoned by his own people and ultimately forced to take his own life. The political landscape itself was a minefield. You, as emperor, are constantly balancing the demands of the Senate, the loyalty of the army, and the fickle whims of the Roman populace. The Senate, ostensibly a consultative body, still harbored republican ideals and resented the erosion of its power. The army, the ultimate arbiter of power, could elevate you to the throne or bring you crashing down. Their allegiance was paramount, and woe betide the emperor who failed to keep them content. Whether through lavish donatives or successful military campaigns, the Roman people, easily swayed by bread and circuses, could turn on you in an instant if their basic needs weren't met, or if they perceived you as weak or tyrannical, or imagine the burden of making decisions that affect millions, all while knowing that a single misstep could mean your end. You're constantly walking a tightrope, trying to appease different factions, prevent uprisings, and secure your borders. There's no easy way out. The moment you show weakness, the vultures begin to circle. The moment you are perceived as too strong, you become a target for those who fear your power. It's a no-win situation for many, a brutal game of survival where the rules are constantly shifting and the penalties are always fatal. The very concept of succession was a perpetual crisis. Unlike hereditary monarchies where the line of succession was clear, the Roman Empire often lacked a defined system. This ambiguity created a power vacuum every time an emperor died, leading to fierce competition and often civil war. You see aspiring emperors, each with their own legions and supporters, clashing in bloody conflicts that tore the empire apart. This wasn't just a political struggle. It was a brutal war of attrition, where the victor claimed the purple and the vanquished often faced execution. Even if you managed to secure the throne, the danger didn't disappear. In fact, it often intensified. Now, you're not just a contender, you're the prize. Everyone wants what you have, and many are willing to kill for it. You employ elaborate security measures, from food tasters to personal bodyguards, but even these precautions are often insufficient. The assassin could be anyone, a trusted servant, a jealous senator, or even a disgruntled family member. The chilling reality is that the closer someone is to you, the greater their opportunity to strike. And then there's the sheer psychological impact of constant threat. You begin to see enemies everywhere. Trust becomes a luxury you can ill afford. Isolation sets in as you withdraw from genuine companionship, fearing betrayal. The weight of the empire rests on your shoulders, and the constant fear for your life becomes an unbearable burden. This isn't just history. It's a profound exploration of what happens when absolute power meets the darker impulses of human nature, a tale that resonates even today. You've survived the initial ascent, but now you sit on the imperial throne, a seat that often felt less like a chair of power and more like a hot seat in a very literal sense. And who's often stoking that fire? The very people sworn to protect you, the Praetorian Guard. These weren't just your typical bodyguards. They were an elite force, the cream of the Roman military, stationed right there in Rome. Their presence was meant to be a symbol of your security, a shield against external threats. But, as you quickly learn, their proximity often made them the most dangerous internal threat of all. Imagine the situation: you're the emperor, the most powerful man in the known world, and yet your life often rests in the hands of a few thousand heavily armed men who camp just outside your palace walls. They're loyal to Rome, sure, but their loyalty to you is often conditional, based on your ability to keep them happy, rich, and preferably busy. This isn't just about paying their wages, it's about providing them with lavish bonuses, known as donatives. Whenever you ascend to the throne, or even just when you want to shore up their support, fail to deliver, and your reign might be shorter than a summer afternoon. Consider the sheer audacity of the Praetorians. They weren't just protecting emperors, they were making them. They held the ultimate power to appoint and depose rulers with frightening regularity. You might wake up one morning, feeling secure in your purple robes, only to find the Praetorian prefect, their commander, standing at your door, not with a morning greeting, but with a thinly veiled demand for more money. Or worse, a declaration that your time is up. A classic example of their immense influence, a common historical truth, is the infamous Year of the Four Emperors in 69 CE. After Nero's demise, the Praetorians played a pivotal role in elevating and then dispatching emperors in rapid succession. You see them first backing Galba, then turning on him when he fails to provide the promised donative. They then offer the empire to the highest bidder, literally, with Otho emerging as their next choice. It's a chaotic, brutal period where the stability of the entire empire rests on the whims of an armed, mercenary-like force. You can practically hear the clinking of coins and the clash of swords in the background. But it's not just about the money. A lesser-known detail about the Praetorians is their deep involvement in palace intrigue. They weren't merely brute force, they were often shrewd political players, manipulated by ambitious senators or disgruntled family members. You'd find their officers entangled in whispers and conspiracies, sometimes even initiating them. Imagine trying to sleep at night, knowing that the very men guarding your bedroom door might be plotting your demise with your estranged brother or your ambitious general. The air in the palace is thick with suspicion, and every shadow seems to hide a listening ear. Historians still debate whether the Praetorian Guard was a necessary evil, providing a crucial check on imperial power, or if their unchecked influence ultimately destabilized the empire. Did they prevent true tyrants from establishing long, oppressive reigns? Or did they simply create a cycle of short-lived emperors and constant civil unrest? Was their power a reflection of a deeper systemic flaw in Roman governance, or just a symptom of the personal failings of various emperors? It's a question that keeps scholars up at night. And perhaps you too, as you drift off. You, as emperor, find yourself in a perpetual state of negotiation with these elite soldiers. You must walk a fine line. You need their loyalty, but you can't allow them to become too powerful. Cultivating their allegiance means appearing strong and decisive, but also generous. Imagine the pressure of constantly having to prove your worth, not just to the Senate or the people, but to the heavily armed men who could, at any moment, decide your fate. You might put on grand military displays, review their drills, and praise their discipline, all while inwardly calculating the cost of their next bonus. Consider the chilling story of Emperor Claudius. He wasn't exactly a natural leader. and his stutter and physical infirmities made him seem an unlikely candidate for the throne. Yet, after Caligula's assassination, it was the Praetorian Guard who literally found him hiding behind a curtain and then declared him emperor. You can almost see them dragging him out. A reluctant figure suddenly thrust into the most dangerous job in Rome. They saw an opportunity to install someone they could control, someone who owed them everything. And for a time, he did. But even Claudius, with his intelligence and his efforts to rule well, eventually fell victim to palace intrigue, likely poisoned by his own wife, Agrippina, who was eager to see her son Nero on the throne. The Praetorians didn't directly kill him, but their initial elevation of him created the environment for later plots. The Praetorian prefects themselves were often figures of immense power, sometimes more powerful than the emperor they served. They commanded the guard and had direct access to the emperor, making them prime candidates for ambition and treachery. Imagine being emperor and knowing that your chief of security, a man you're supposed to trust implicitly, is often viewed as a potential successor, or worse, a potential assassin. You'd find yourself constantly evaluating their loyalty, looking for any sign of dissent or ambition in their eyes. Even the most cunning emperors struggled with the Praetorian problem. Tiberius, a shrewd and often paranoid ruler, eventually withdrew to Capri, leaving the Praetorian prefect, Sejanus, in charge of Rome. For a time, Sejanus effectively ruled the city, consolidating immense power, eliminating rivals, and even marrying into the imperial family. You can imagine Tiberius, isolated on his island, receiving reports of Sejanus's growing influence, the fear gnawing at him. He eventually had Sejanus executed, but only after a long, tense struggle that highlighted just how much power the prefect had amassed. It's a testament to the fact that even keeping your distance didn't always protect you from your own guard. The Praetorians also served as Rome's only permanent military presence within the city itself. This gave them an unparalleled advantage in any coup attempt. While legions were stationed on the frontiers, the Praetorians were right there, ready to seize control of the capital, the palace, and the emperor himself. You're constantly aware of their proximity, the sound of their marching boots echoing through the city, a constant reminder of their power. It's a subtle but pervasive threat, like a predator circling its prey, always there, always watching. The system of donatives, while seemingly a straightforward way to buy loyalty, also created a dangerous precedent. It meant that every new emperor had to outbid the last, or at least match their generosity, to secure the guard's allegiance. This put an immense strain on the imperial treasury and incentivized the Praetorians to frequently overthrow emperors in order to receive fresh, lucrative payments from the next incumbent. You're essentially paying protection money to the very people who are supposed to be protecting you, and they're constantly raising their rates. Sometimes, the Praetorians weren't even overtly hostile, they were simply opportunistic. After the assassination of Pertinax in 193 CE, the Praetorian Guard openly auctioned off the emperorship to the highest bidder. You can almost hear the shouts of the auctioneer, the desperate pleas of senators, as the fate of the vast Roman Empire is decided by a literal bidding war among two wealthy senators. Didius Julianus won the bid, but his reign lasted only 66 days, a clear sign that buying the purple didn't guarantee you any real legitimacy or support. It was a humiliating moment for Rome, a stark illustration of how far the imperial office had fallen under the influence of its own guard. The presence of the Praetorian Guard thus transformed the very nature of Roman politics. It shifted the locus of power away from the traditional institutions of the Senate and the assemblies and placed it squarely in the hands of the military. You're not just dealing with political maneuvering anymore, you're dealing with armed might. Every decision you make, every policy you enact, must be viewed through the lens of how it will be perceived by the Praetorians. Will they approve? Will it upset them? Will it lead to another coup? It's a constant, low hum of anxiety that never truly fades. Even as you sleep, the rustle of a curtain, the creak of a floorboard, The distant shouts from the barracks, each sound might trigger a moment of panic. You might even find yourself developing a strange sort of Stockholm syndrome, where you try to anticipate their desires, to preempt their disaffection, all to ensure your own survival. The Praetorian Guard, intended to be your bulwark, often became your most formidable and unpredictable adversary. They were, in essence, the ultimate gatekeepers to the underworld, deciding who passed through the gates of power and who exited through the gates of death. You've navigated the treacherous waters of the Praetorian Guard, but even if you manage to keep those heavily armed protectors happy, a different kind of danger lurks much closer within your own household. Family feuds and fatal follies were a common, often tragic, feature of Roman imperial life. The gilded cages of the imperial palace, far from being havens of peace, frequently became battlegrounds for ambition, jealousy, and outright murder. You might find that the hand offering you a comforting cup of wine belongs to someone plotting your demise, and that someone is often a blood relative. Imagine the unique pressures on an imperial family. Unlike typical families, where squabbles might end in shouting matches or stony silences, here, a disagreement could escalate into civil war, a slight into a full-blown conspiracy. The stakes are astronomically high. Every decision you make as emperor, particularly regarding succession or favoritism, creates ripples of resentment and ambition among your own kin. Your wife, your mother, your children, your siblings, all of them have a vested interest in your power, and some might even covet it for themselves. A common historical truth is that poison was a frequent tool in these family dramas. It was subtle, deniable, and could be administered by someone with intimate access. You'd be constantly wary of your food, your drink, even your bathwater. The imperial kitchens, usually bustling with activity, would become places of immense suspicion. Food tasters were essential, but even they weren't foolproof. A slow-acting poison, designed to mimic a natural illness, could evade detection until it was too late. You might wake up feeling unwell, with a persistent cough or stomach pains, and wonder if it's just a common ailment or the beginning of a deliberate, fatal plot by someone you supposedly trust. Consider the chilling story of Agrippina the Younger, mother of Emperor Nero. She was a woman of immense ambition and ruthless determination. You see her maneuvering herself into power, first as the wife of Claudius, then as the dominant figure in young Nero's early reign. Her ultimate goal was to secure her son's position and maintain her own influence. She wasn't above eliminating rivals, or even, it is widely believed, her own husband, Claudius, to achieve her aims. The legend says she poisoned him with a dish of mushrooms, a seemingly innocuous meal turned deadly. Imagine sitting at a feast, surrounded by your family, knowing that any bite could be your last, and the person who prepared it is sitting right next to you, smiling sweetly. A lesser-known detail is how often imperial children were victims of these family struggles, not just the perpetrators. You often find infant heirs or young potential rivals quietly disappearing from the historical record, their deaths attributed to childhood illnesses. While some were undoubtedly natural, the timing of others, particularly when they cleared a path for another claimant, raises serious questions. You'd be a parent living in constant fear, not just for your own life, but for the lives of your innocent children, knowing they could be seen as pawns or threats in a much larger, deadlier game. Historians still debate whether the Roman imperial family's propensity for internecine conflict was a unique pathology born from the nature of absolute power, or merely an exaggerated reflection of the power struggles common within any ruling dynasty throughout history. Was there something inherent in the Roman system that fostered such deadly familial discord? Or did specific individuals with particularly ruthless ambitions simply emerge at crucial times? It's a fascinating, if grim point of discussion that continues to intrigue scholars. You, as emperor, would be acutely aware of the delicate balance you must maintain within your own family. Favored children could become targets for their envious siblings. An ambitious wife might push for her own son to be declared heir, even if it meant undermining your chosen successor. You'd find yourself constantly managing these complex relationships, trying to prevent simmering resentments from boiling over into open rebellion or, worse, a silent plot. This isn't just about love and loyalty, it's about power dynamics played out in the most intimate of settings. Think of the Emperor Caracalla. His reign is a prime example of fratricide born from extreme family rivalry. You see him ascend to the throne alongside his younger brother, Geta, as co-emperors. A situation ripe for disaster. Their hatred for each other was legendary, so intense that they couldn't even stand to be in the same room. Imagine the tension within the palace, the whispers, the constant fear of one brother betraying the other. Caracalla, consumed by paranoia and ambition, eventually had Geta murdered right in their mother's arms. The horror of such an act, committed by one brother against another, underscores the brutal realities of imperial power. You can almost hear their mother's screams echoing through the palace halls. The role of imperial women in these feuds is particularly striking. They were often denied direct political power, but they wielded immense influence through their husbands and sons. This indirect power could make them formidable strategists in the deadly Game of Thrones. You'd see empresses like Livia Drusilla, Augustus's wife, a woman often suspected, though never proven, of quietly removing anyone who stood in the way of her son Tiberius's ascension. Her ambition was subtle, her methods veiled, but her impact was undeniable. The phrase "behind every great man is a great woman" took on a much more sinister meaning in the Roman imperial context. Even the process of adoption, intended to secure a successor when there was no direct male heir, could become a source of fatal folly. While seemingly pragmatic, it often introduced a new element of instability, as the adopted son might be viewed with suspicion by the existing family, or might himself become an ambitious rival. You see emperors choosing heirs, hoping for stability, only to unknowingly sow the seeds of future conflict within their own bloodline. The psychological toll of such constant familial tension would be immense. You'd live in an atmosphere of pervasive distrust, unable to truly relax even in the presence of your closest relatives. Every smile might conceal a hidden agenda, every gift a veiled threat. The joy of having a family, a support system, would be replaced by a gnawing paranoia, transforming your home into a gilded prison. Sleep, when it came, would be restless, filled with nightmares of betrayal and the chilling realization that your greatest enemies might share your dinner table. This constant threat from within led to increasingly elaborate measures to secure succession and prevent challenges. You'd see emperors adopting their heirs publicly, investing them with powers, and parading them before the legions to try and cement their position. Yet, even these efforts were often insufficient to overcome the deep-seated ambitions and rivalries that festered within the imperial family. The very act of naming an heir could create an immediate target, putting the chosen successor in as much peril as the emperor himself. The stories of Roman imperial families are a stark reminder that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, often turning the bonds of kinship into chains of mutual suspicion and potential destruction. The warmth of familial love was often overshadowed by the cold, calculating logic of power, leading to acts of brutality that defy imagination. It's a tragic paradox. The very people who should have been your greatest allies became your most dangerous threats. Their loyalty as fluid as the sands of the arena. You've dodged the Praetorian Guard's shifting loyalties and survived the treacherous embrace of your own family, but now you face another insidious threat, the emperor himself. Or, more precisely, the madness, malice, and misrule that often gripped those who held absolute power, transforming them into their own worst enemies. When an emperor's mind began to unravel, or their tyrannical tendencies escalated, their survival became a daily gamble, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. Imagine the immense psychological pressure of being the most powerful person in the world, with no real checks on your authority. You are the law, the ultimate arbiter of life and death, and every whim can be instantly gratified. For some, this intoxicating cocktail of power and isolation led to paranoia, megalomania, and outright insanity. You might find yourself slowly losing touch with reality, mistaking flattery for genuine adoration, and dissent for treason. The imperial palace, once a symbol of your power, becomes a gilded cage for your increasingly twisted mind. A common historical truth is that unaccountable power can corrupt absolutely, leading to behaviors that defy logic and basic human decency. When an emperor descended into madness, the consequences were catastrophic, not just for their personal safety, but for the stability of the entire Roman Empire. Their erratic decisions, cruel whims, and unpredictable outbursts created an atmosphere of terror that alienated even their most loyal supporters. Consider the notorious Emperor Caligula. His reign is a chilling example of unchecked power leading to extreme pathology. You see him begin as a promising young ruler, but quickly descend into a nightmare of depravity and cruelty. He declared himself a god, conversed with the moon, and made his favorite horse, Incitatus, a consul. Imagine the fear and disbelief among the Roman elite as they witnessed these bizarre spectacles. He forced senators to run miles ahead of his chariot, ordered people executed for minor slights, and engaged in sadistic public displays. You might be a high-ranking official, forced to attend his grotesque feasts, subtly trying to avoid catching his eye, knowing that a single wrong look could seal your doom. A lesser-known detail about emperors like Caligula is how their erratic behavior created an atmosphere of pervasive uncertainty and fear. People in power thrive on predictability, but a mad emperor eliminated any semblance of it. One day, you might be rewarded handsomely. The next, you could be tortured and killed on a whim. This constant state of anxiety paralyzed the government and the populace. No one dared to voice dissent, and everyone became an actor, constantly performing for the emperor's approval, lest they become the next target of his twisted amusement. You'd find yourself practicing your expressions in a mirror, trying to perfect a look of bland acceptance, knowing that too much joy or too much sorrow could be misconstrued. Historians still debate the true nature of these mad emperors. Were they genuinely insane, suffering from mental illnesses, exacerbated by their unique position? Or were they simply extreme examples of ruthless megalomaniacs whose actions were designed to consolidate their power through terror? Was Caligula truly mad? Or was he a strategic tyrant using bizarre behavior to destabilize the old order and assert absolute control? It's a complex question, often clouded by the biases of ancient historians, leaving much to interpretation. You, as a Roman citizen or official under such a ruler, would live in a constant state of dread every morning. You'd wake up unsure of what fresh horror the day might bring. The sheer unpredictability of an emperor's malice was more terrifying than any external enemy. You couldn't plan. You couldn't trust. You could only react. This kind of environment often bred conspiracies, as the only perceived escape from the madness was to eliminate the source of it. The very desperation caused by the emperor's misrule often became the catalyst for his downfall. Think of Nero again. While often depicted as a fiddle-playing tyrant during the Great Fire of Rome, his early reign, guided by advisors like Seneca, was relatively benign. It was his gradual descent into self-indulgence, paranoia, and artistic megalomania that turned him into a monster. You witness his obsession with music and performance, his construction of the opulent Domus Aurea, and his increasingly brutal purges of anyone he suspected of disloyalty, including his own mother and former mentor, Seneca. The chilling thing about Nero is that his transformation was gradual. You could see the red flags, the warning signs, but no one could stop the inevitable spiral. The whispers of disaffection would grow louder, culminating in open revolt. The consequences of imperial misrule weren't just personal, they were systemic. When an emperor was tyrannical, the administration of the empire suffered. Competent officials were purged, replaced by sycophants or incompetents. Justice became arbitrary, taxes oppressive, and military discipline eroded. You'd see the once efficient Roman machinery grinding to a halt. Or worse, turning against its own people. This instability weakened the empire from within, making it vulnerable to both internal revolts and external threats. The Roman populace, though accustomed to firm rule, had a breaking point, and a truly tyrannical emperor often found it the hard way. Another emperor often cited for his tyrannical tendencies is Domitian. While not as overtly mad as Caligula, his reign became increasingly authoritarian and marked by paranoia. You see him enforcing strict social and religious codes, demanding to be addressed as master and god, and instituting a reign of terror marked by informers and public executions of senators and intellectuals. The atmosphere in Rome under Domitian was oppressive, filled with suspicion and fear. Even his own family members, including his wife Domitia, are said to have been involved in the conspiracy that ultimately led to his assassination. When the fear you instill extends to your own household, your days are truly numbered. These emperors, consumed by their own power and paranoia, often isolated themselves, cutting off any real feedback or dissenting opinions. They surrounded themselves with yes-men who would only tell them what they wanted to hear. This echo chamber further exacerbated their detachment from reality, preventing them from seeing the growing discontent and the plots brewing against them. You, as a loyal advisor, might try to offer honest counsel, only to find yourself dismissed, banished, or worse. The walls of the palace, intended to keep threats out, effectively trapped the emperor within his own delusional world. The assassination of these emperors often came from those closest to them, the Praetorian Guard, palace officials, or even their own wives driven to desperation by the emperor's escalating madness or malice. They weren't killed by grand armies or foreign invaders, but by a small group of individuals who decided that the risk of acting was less than the risk of allowing the emperor's tyranny to continue. The very acts of cruelty and unpredictable terror that these emperors used to control others ultimately became the instruments of their own destruction. It's a grim irony the power that inflated their egos and fueled their madness also sealed their fate. You've dodged the Praetorian Guard, survived your family's deadly embrace, and even endured the madness of an unraveling emperor. Now, as you sit on the imperial throne, you begin to truly understand the weight of the purple. This isn't just a fancy robe, it's a crushing burden of immense pressure and profound isolation. A reality that often led to paranoia and a fatal distrust of even your closest advisors. You are the embodiment of the Roman Empire, and every decision, every whisper, every shadow feels like a direct threat. Imagine the sheer scale of the empire you now command. From the misty reaches of Britannia to the scorching deserts of Egypt, millions of lives depend on your decisions. You are responsible for maintaining peace, securing borders, ensuring the grain supply, and dispensing justice. The sheer volume of information, petitions, and reports that cross your desk daily would be overwhelming. You're constantly making choices with far-reaching consequences, knowing that a single misstep could plunge vast regions into chaos or ignite a rebellion. This isn't just a job, it's an all-consuming responsibility that never truly ends. A common historical truth is that absolute power often fosters deep-seated paranoia. When you have the power to command legions, condemn men, and shape the destiny of nations, you also become the ultimate target. Everyone wants something from you, and many might want your position. You start to see hidden motives everywhere. A simple request from a senator might mask a political maneuver. A friendly gesture from a general could be a test of your resolve. You begin to question everyone's loyalty, even those who have served you faithfully for years. The trust that once flowed freely between people becomes a luxury you can no longer afford. Consider the Emperor Tiberius. After the death of Augustus, He inherited an empire and a profound sense of suspicion. You see him, initially, as a capable administrator, but his later years were consumed by an ever-growing paranoia. He withdrew to the island of Capri, away from the perceived dangers of Rome. But his isolation only fueled his fears. From afar, he became increasingly reliant on informers and accusations, leading to a brutal series of treason trials and executions. Imagine living in Rome during this time, knowing that a casual comment overheard by a spy could lead to your arrest, torture, and death. Tiberius, trapped by his own fears, became a tyrant in absentia, his paranoia casting a long, dark shadow over the entire empire. A lesser-known detail about this imperial isolation is the concept of the amicus principis, or friend of the emperor. While seemingly a position of great honor, it was also one of extreme peril. These were the men closest to the emperor, his most trusted advisors and confidants. Yet, because of their proximity to power, they were also the most vulnerable to the emperor's growing paranoia. A sudden shift in the emperor's mood, a whispered accusation, or simply being too successful could lead to their downfall. You might find yourself in this position, basking in the emperor's favor one day, only to be accused of treason and executed the next. The line between friend and enemy became terrifyingly thin. Historians still debate whether the isolation and paranoia experienced by Roman emperors were inherent to the system of absolute monarchy, or if they were largely a result of individual psychological predispositions interacting with the immense pressures of the office. Was it the system that broke the man, or were fragile men simply elevated to a position that magnified their existing flaws? It's a complex interplay, and the answer likely lies somewhere in between. But the outcome was almost always tragic. You, as emperor, would find that your true friends dwindle to none. The constant flattery and sycophancy from those seeking favor would create an impenetrable wall around you, shielding you from honest counsel. No one dares to contradict you, to challenge your decisions, or to point out your flaws. This lack of genuine feedback leads to an intellectual and emotional stultification. You become accustomed to being always right, always obeyed, always praised. This warped reality further fuels the paranoia, as you assume anyone who isn't fawning must be plotting against you. The constant threat of assassination, both real and imagined, would weigh heavily on your mind. You'd develop elaborate security protocols, from food tasters to personal guards, but even these would offer little true comfort. The fear would become an uninvited companion, whispering in your ear, making you suspicious of every glance, every conversation. You'd find yourself sleeping fitfully, waking with a jolt at every unfamiliar sound, your mind racing with potential scenarios of betrayal. Think about the Emperor Hadrian. While generally considered a good emperor, even he, in his later years, succumbed to a degree of paranoia. You see him becoming increasingly suspicious of those around him, executing prominent figures, including his own brother-in-law, on charges of conspiracy. His long travels throughout the empire, while beneficial for administrative oversight, also served to distance him from the intrigues of Rome, perhaps contributing to a feeling of being out of touch and therefore more vulnerable to unseen threats. Even a seemingly enlightened ruler could fall prey to the isolating effects of supreme power. The very concept of imperial dignity, while intended to inspire respect, also contributed to the emperor's isolation. You were expected to maintain an almost godlike detachment, aloof from the common man and even from your peers. This created an emotional chasm between the emperor and everyone else, preventing genuine human connection. Imagine living your life in a golden cage, admired from afar but never truly understood or befriended. This psychological burden often manifested in physical ailments. The constant stress and lack of genuine connection could lead to insomnia, anxiety, and a host of other health issues. You'd be surrounded by the best physicians in the empire, but no medicine could cure the deep-seated fear and loneliness that came with the purple. The weight wasn't just political, it was profoundly personal, crushing the spirit of even the strongest individuals. The emperor's private life often became a distorted reflection of this paranoia. Marriages were often political alliances, not unions of love, and children were pawns in the game of succession. Even within your own family, loyalty was suspect. You might find yourself unable to truly relax, even with your spouse or children, always on guard, always observing, always wary. This pervasive distrust meant that the ultimate power came at the cost of true intimacy and peace of mind. The reign of an emperor burdened by the weight of the purple was a constant dance on the edge of a precipice. The immense responsibility, coupled with the ever-present threat of assassination and the corrosive effects of absolute power, turned many rulers into figures consumed by fear and distrust. Their very power became their prison, and their paranoia, ironically, often led to the very outcomes they feared most. The purple, then, was not just a symbol of authority, it was a shroud, a heavy garment that often led its wearer to an early, violent end. You felt the isolating chill of the purple, constantly looking over your shoulder, but sometimes, the threat to your life comes not from the shadows of the palace, but from the roar of the masses and the clash of distant swords. Rebellions and risings, the price of discontent. These were massive, empire-shaking events that routinely shattered imperial tranquility and brought emperors to their knees, often literally. When an entire province, or a significant portion of your legions, decided they'd had enough, your personal security became irrelevant. Your very empire was at stake. Imagine being the emperor, receiving news from a distant frontier that a popular general, fueled by ambition and the loyalty of his troops, has declared himself emperor. Or perhaps you hear whispers of widespread famine in Egypt, leading to riots that threaten Rome's vital grain supply. These aren't minor inconveniences. They are existential crises that demand your immediate and decisive action. You're no longer just worried about a poisoned cup, you're worried about the stability of your entire dominion. A common historical truth about the Roman Empire is its immense size and diversity, which, while a source of strength, was also a constant challenge to imperial control. Maintaining stability across such vast territories, with diverse cultures, economies, and military forces, was an almost impossible task. Any spark of discontent could quickly ignite into a raging inferno, threatening to consume your reign. You might find yourself constantly moving legions, negotiating with local leaders, and trying to anticipate where the next rebellion might erupt. Consider the Emperor Galba again. His brief reign after Nero's death is a prime example of how quickly imperial authority could crumble under the weight of widespread military discontent. You see him attempting to restore discipline and cut back on the extravagance of Nero's court. A noble goal, perhaps, but one that alienated the very legions who had supported his rise. When he failed to deliver the promised donative, and showed an arbitrary cruelty in his punishments, various legions across the empire, particularly in Germania, declared their own commanders emperor. The empire, previously united under one ruler, fractured into competing factions, each marching on Rome. Galba, caught between the mutiny of his own praetorians and the advance of rival armies, was swiftly overthrown and killed. His story highlights how deeply rooted military dissatisfaction could be a fatal blow to any emperor. A lesser-known detail about these large-scale rebellions is how they often started with a small, seemingly insignificant act of defiance. A single legion refusing an order, a local governor making an unpopular decree, or even a religious sect challenging imperial authority. Any of these could snowball into a massive uprising. You'd be constantly monitoring these seemingly minor events, knowing that neglecting them could lead to an unstoppable conflagration. It's like trying to put out a forest fire when all you have is a bucket of water. If you don't act quickly and decisively, the whole forest goes up in flames. Historians still debate whether these frequent rebellions were an inevitable consequence of the Roman system's reliance on military might for imperial succession, or if they reflected deeper economic and social grievances within the provinces. Were the legions simply power-hungry, Or did they often represent the frustrations of the wider population with corrupt governors or oppressive taxes? The answer probably varies from case to case, but the constant threat of military coups and provincial uprisings was a persistent feature of imperial life. A constant reminder that power flowed from the sword. You, as emperor, would find yourself constantly campaigning, not just against foreign enemies, but against your own generals and provinces. The idea of a peaceful, stable reign was largely a myth for many Roman emperors. You'd be out on campaign, leading your legions against a rebel general, knowing that failure meant not just defeat, but almost certain death and the end of your dynasty. The sheer physical and mental toll of constant warfare, often against your own countrymen, was immense. Think of Septimius Severus. He came to power through a brutal civil war in the year of the Five Emperors, 193 CE, emerging victorious over several rivals, each backed by their own legions. You see him meticulously eliminating his opponents, one by one, through decisive military campaigns. His reign, while ultimately stable, was forged in the fires of internal conflict. His famous advice to his sons, Caracalla and Geta, was, "Enrich the soldiers and scorn all other men." A stark recognition that military loyalty was the cornerstone of imperial survival. It's a testament to how deeply the threat of military rebellion shaped imperial policy. The challenges weren't always military. Sometimes, they were economic. Widespread famine, caused by natural disasters or poor administration, could trigger mass unrest. You'd see the granaries of Rome emptying, the bread dole becoming insufficient, and the urban poor taking to the streets in angry mobs. While not an armed rebellion in the traditional sense, such uprisings could be just as dangerous, leading to chaos and creating an opportunity for ambitious rivals to seize power. You'd be constantly trying to ensure the grain ships arrived from Egypt, knowing that a delay could mean the end of your reign, or at least a very uncomfortable few days. Another form of rebellion came from the frontiers, particularly from ambitious governors who amassed too much power and then decided to strike out on their own. The Roman Empire was often divided into large provincial commands, and a successful governor, especially one with a loyal army, could easily declare independence. You'd see maps with sections of your empire highlighted in red, signifying secessionist movements that you needed to crush before they inspired others. The sheer logistics of moving legions across vast distances to suppress these revolts were staggering, consuming immense resources and time. The threat of these large-scale revolts meant that emperors often had to be skilled military strategists and capable administrators. You couldn't just rely on your generals. You often had to take to the field yourself, risking your life alongside your troops. This active role, while dangerous, was also crucial for maintaining the loyalty of the legions. An emperor who was seen as weak or cowardly would quickly lose the respect of his soldiers, leaving him vulnerable to internal challenges. Ultimately, the constant cycle of rebellions and risings highlights a fundamental fragility within the Roman imperial system. Despite its outward strength, it was always susceptible to internal fracturing, particularly when an emperor was perceived as weak, tyrannical, or illegitimate. The price of discontent was steep, often paid in blood, and it was a price that almost every Roman emperor, at some point, had to confront. The rumble of distant legions, the cries of the restless populace, these were the unsettling lullabies that accompanied many a Roman emperor to their often early, often violent slumber. You've survived the crushing weight of the purple, navigated military revolts, and even outmaneuvered treacherous family members. But sometimes, fate has a cruel sense of humor. Even if you manage to avoid daggers, poisons, and mutinous legions, there's always the fickle finger of fate. This refers to the unexpected accidents, debilitating illnesses, and plain bad luck that cut short the lives of emperors, defying even the most elaborate security measures and meticulous planning. You can be the most powerful person in the world, but you are still, fundamentally, a mortal, susceptible to the same random misfortunes as any common citizen. Imagine being the emperor, surrounded by your guards, your food tasters, your highly skilled physicians, and yet, you trip on a loose tile in the palace. or catch a common fever that turns deadly, or are struck by lightning. These aren't the dramatic assassinations you read about. They're the quiet, anticlimactic ends that highlight the vulnerability of even the most powerful individuals. You could literally be at the peak of your power, planning your next grand campaign, when suddenly, your body simply gives out, or an unforeseen event brings your reign to an abrupt halt. A common historical truth is that even in antiquity, medicine had its limits. Despite the advancements of Roman physicians, many diseases that are easily treatable today were fatal back then. A bad cold could turn into pneumonia, a minor cut could become infected, and a common stomach ailment could lead to a swift and painful demise. You, as emperor, might have access to the best care, but that care often amounted to little more than herbal remedies and hopeful prayers. Consider the emperor Marcus Aurelius. He is often lauded as one of the 5 good emperors, a philosopher king whose reign was marked by relative stability and intellectual depth. Yet, even he succumbed to illness, likely the Antonine Plague, a devastating pandemic that swept across the empire. You see him on campaign, diligently fulfilling his duties, when suddenly, he's struck down by a debilitating sickness. His death, while not violent, marked the end of an era of relative peace and ushered in a period of intense instability. It's a poignant reminder that even the wisest and most virtuous ruler is ultimately powerless against the forces of nature and disease. His passing, in what was probably a tent on a military frontier, was far less grand than his philosophical legacy, a testament to fate's indifference. A lesser-known detail is the role of travel and exposure in an emperor's health. While emperors often remained in Rome, many, especially those who were military men, spent significant time traveling the vast empire, inspecting legions, overseeing projects, and leading campaigns. This constant movement exposed them to different climates, unfamiliar foods, and a wider array of diseases. You might be in a damp, cold Britannia one month, and the scorching heat of Syria the next, your body constantly adjusting, making you more susceptible to illness. The very act of governing such a vast realm could be a health hazard in itself, a slow, often unnoticed, form of attrition. Historians still debate the precise causes of death for many Roman emperors, often relying on incomplete or biased ancient sources. Was it natural causes, as reported, or a cleverly disguised poisoning? Was it a genuine accident, or a meticulously planned assassination made to look like one? The ambiguity surrounding these deaths underscores the challenges of historical interpretation and the pervasive paranoia that characterized the imperial court. It reminds you that even the most definitive historical accounts often have lingering questions that remain unanswered. You, as emperor, would find yourself in a strange paradox, immensely powerful, yet incredibly vulnerable. You could command legions and build monumental structures, but you couldn't command your own immune system or deflect a falling object. This existential vulnerability would add another layer of anxiety to your already stressful life. You might find yourself developing elaborate superstitions, avoiding certain omens, or clinging to the pronouncements of seers, desperately trying to exert some control over the uncontrollable. Think of Constantine the Great. While he lived a long and impactful life, transforming the empire with his conversion to Christianity, his death was ultimately due to illness, likely a result of old age and the strains of his long reign. You see him leading his people, consolidating power, building his new capital, Constantinople, only to eventually succumb to the natural decline of the body. His end, though peaceful compared to many, was still an unyielding reminder that even the grandest emperors were bound by human mortality. He planned for his succession, but he couldn't plan for immortality. Sometimes, the accidents were truly bizarre. There are accounts of emperors being struck by lightning, falling from horses, or even drowning in their own baths. While some of these stories may be exaggerated, they highlight the arbitrary nature of fate. You could be enjoying a moment of leisure, completely unguarded against human enemies, only to be struck down by an unforeseen calamity. The suddenness of such events would send shockwaves through the empire, leading to immediate power struggles and a scramble for succession. The psychological impact of knowing you could die at any moment, not from an enemy's blade but from a random twist of fate, must have been immense. It adds a layer of fatalism to your worldview. You might become more reckless, or more religious, or simply more resigned to the inevitable. The concept of memento mori, remember you must die, would be a constant, uninvited guest in your mind, regardless of your imperial status. Even during periods of supposed peace and prosperity, the emperor's life was a delicate balance. A simple indigestion could spark rumors of poisoning. A prolonged fever could lead to immediate jockeying for power among potential successors. The very act of falling ill, regardless of its cause, was a moment of profound weakness that could be exploited by rivals. You'd find yourself trying to maintain a facade of robust health, even when you felt terrible, knowing that any sign of infirmity could invite disaster. Ultimately, the fickle finger of fate serves as a humbling reminder that even the most absolute power cannot conquer mortality. The stories of emperors dying from natural causes or freak accidents, while less dramatic than assassinations, are perhaps even more chilling. They illustrate that despite all the guards, all the political maneuvering, and all the wealth, the emperor was still just a human being, utterly vulnerable to the unpredictable whims of life and death. And as you drift off to sleep, perhaps you can take a small comfort in the thought that, unlike a Roman emperor, your greatest nightly concern isn't a sudden illness or a tripping hazard. You've contended with fate's unpredictable whims, but now we delve into the most classic Roman imperial threat poison, plots, and palace intrigue. This is where the whispers turn deadly, where the grand halls of the imperial palace become the stage for cunning and often theatrical assassinations. It's about the sinister methods used by conspirators to eliminate emperors, from subtle, undetectable poisons to elaborate, cloak and dagger operations carried out within the very heart of your power. Imagine yourself as emperor, reclining at a lavish banquet. The air is thick with the scent of roasted meats and sweet wines. Musicians play softly, and courtiers offer their fawning praises. Yet, beneath the veneer of luxury and camaraderie, a chilling game is afoot. Every dish placed before you, every goblet offered, could conceal a deadly secret. The person smiling across the table, seemingly harmless, might be the orchestrator of your demise. This isn't external warfare. It's a battle fought with cunning, deception, and a complete disregard for human life, all within the confines of your own home. A common historical truth is that conspiracies were a constant feature of Roman imperial politics, the very nature of absolute power, with no clear line of succession and immense rewards for the victor, made plots against the emperor almost inevitable. It wasn't a question of if, but when, and by whom. You'd be constantly aware of this underlying current of scheming, flowing beneath the surface of daily court life, like a hidden river just waiting to burst forth. Consider the assassination of Domitian. He was a paranoid and tyrannical emperor who had purged many senators and officials. You see him in his final days, increasingly isolated, yet still powerful. The conspiracy against him was deeply rooted within his own household, involving members of his personal staff, his chamberlains, and even his own wife, Domitia. Imagine the meticulous planning. The conspirators reportedly sharpened a dagger used for paring nails and tied bandages around their arms to conceal it. He was lured into his private chamber by his freedman, Stephanus, under the pretense of revealing a plot, only to be stabbed repeatedly. The irony is palpable. A man who lived by suspicion was ultimately betrayed by those closest to him. In the most intimate of settings, his death wasn't a public spectacle, but a furtive act in a secluded room, a testament to the chilling efficiency of palace intrigue. A lesser-known detail about these plots is the psychological warfare that often preceded the physical act. Conspirators would sow seeds of distrust, spread rumors, and create an atmosphere of anxiety around the target emperor. They would manipulate his paranoia, turning him against his own loyalists, thereby weakening his support network. You'd find yourself caught in a web of deceit, unable to distinguish friend from foe, as your inner circle slowly became infiltrated by those plotting your downfall. The poison wasn't just in your drink, it was in your mind, eroding your trust in everyone. Historians still debate the motivations behind many of these conspiracies. Were they driven by genuine outrage at imperial tyranny, by pure personal ambition, or by a complex mixture of both? Did the conspirators truly believe they were acting for the good of Rome, or were they simply seizing an opportunity for personal gain? The answers are rarely clear-cut. Making these plots fascinating case studies in human psychology and political maneuvering, you, as emperor, would develop a sixth sense for deception. Every conversation would be an interrogation, every gift a potential trap. You'd scrutinize facial expressions, interpret silences, and dissect every word spoken in your presence. This constant state of vigilance would be mentally exhausting, turning social interaction into a high-stakes game. The opulent palace, filled with beautiful art and luxurious comforts, would feel less like a home and more like a carefully constructed death trap. Think of Commodus, son of Marcus Aurelius. His reign was characterized by extravagance, megalomania, and a gradual withdrawal from the duties of governance, preferring to fight as a gladiator in the arena. His behavior alienated the Senate and his key advisors. You see him becoming increasingly erratic, obsessed with his own divine status. The plot against him was initiated by his own inner circle, his mistress Marcia, his chamberlain Eclectus, and the Praetorian prefect Latus. They tried to poison him first, but when that failed, he vomited the poison. They sent an athlete, Narcissus, to strangle him in his bath. This multi-layered plot highlights the desperation of those around him to end his tyrannical reign. Using whatever means necessary, it's a grisly reminder that even supreme physical strength couldn't save an emperor from well-organized domestic intrigue. The methods of assassination varied widely. Sometimes it was poison, slow or fast-acting, slipped into food or drink. Other times it was a dagger, concealed and used at a moment of vulnerability, perhaps during a public ceremony or in a private chamber. The choice of method often depended on the access of the conspirators and their desire to make the death appear natural or accidental. You'd be constantly aware of your surroundings, even in seemingly safe environments, knowing that a moment of distraction could be fatal. The role of women in palace intrigue, while often overlooked in broader historical narratives, was absolutely critical. Empresses, mistresses, and even female slaves could be powerful figures in these conspiracies. They had unparalleled access to the emperor's private life, his food, his bedchamber. They could be motivators, informants, or even direct participants in the plots. Imagine the chilling scenario of your most intimate companion being the one to deliver the fatal blow, or orchestrate it from the shadows. The aftermath of such a plot was often equally chaotic. The death of an emperor, even a tyrannical one, created a power vacuum, leading to immediate jockeying for succession. Conspirators often had a preferred candidate lined up, but the Praetorian Guard, the Senate, and rival generals would quickly enter the fray, leading to further instability and often more bloodshed. The cycle of violence continued, driven by the ambitions unleashed by the emperor's demise. Ultimately, poison, plots, and palace intrigue were the most intimate and insidious threats to a Roman emperor's life. They represented a constant, chilling reminder that absolute power, while outwardly magnificent, was inwardly rotten with suspicion and betrayal. The gilded halls and marble statues could not protect you from the insidious whispers and the unseen hand that often brought the purple-clad ruler to an early, often gruesome, end. And as you drift off, perhaps you can be thankful for the relative safety of your own sleeping arrangements. Far from the daggers hidden within the imperial folds, you've witnessed the deadly dance of poison and plots within the palace walls. But zoom out now and observe a larger, more cyclical truth about the Roman imperial experience: the endless cycle of violence. This refers to the recurring pattern of instability, assassinations, and civil wars that plagued the Roman imperial system, making a long and peaceful reign a rare anomaly rather than the norm. It's a continuous, self-perpetuating loop where the means to gain power often became the very methods of losing it. Imagine Rome, a city built on conquest and military might, where the legions held ultimate sway, the very foundation of the empire. Its military prowess also contained the seeds of its own destruction when that power was turned inward. You see a new emperor ascend, often on the back of military support, or through the elimination of rivals, only for that very mechanism to be used against him by the next ambitious contender. It's a game of musical chairs, but when the music stops, someone always loses their head. A common historical truth is that the lack of a clear, universally accepted system of succession was the primary fuel for this endless cycle. Unlike hereditary monarchies, where the eldest son typically inherited the throne, Rome often relied on adoption, military acclamation, or simply brute force. This ambiguity created a power vacuum every time an emperor died, turning moments of transition into periods of extreme vulnerability and violent struggle. You, as a Roman citizen, would live with the constant uncertainty of who your next ruler would be, and whether their ascension would plunge the empire into another bloody civil war. Consider the crisis of the 3rd century, a period roughly 235 to 284 CE that perfectly embodies this relentless cycle. You see emperor after emperor, 26 official emperors in just 49 years, with most dying violent deaths. Generals would be proclaimed emperor by their legions on the frontier, march on Rome, overthrow the current incumbent, and then swiftly fall victim to their own ambitious subordinates or rival generals. Imagine the sheer chaos, the empire constantly on the brink of collapse, drained by internal conflicts while external enemies pressed on all borders. You'd be living in an age where the lifespan of an emperor was often shorter than a modern-day professional athlete's career. A lesser-known detail about this cycle is how it often led to a devaluation of the imperial office itself. When emperors were dying at such a rapid rate, and often through ignominious means, the aura of divinity and stability that once surrounded the office began to erode. It became less about a legitimate claim to power and more about who had the strongest legions or the most ruthless conspirators. You'd witness the Roman populace becoming jaded, accustomed to the sight of new emperors rising and falling, their reigns mere blips in a larger violent pattern. This cynicism further contributed to instability, as it became easier to justify overthrowing a ruler who seemed just as temporary as the last. Historians still debate whether the endless cycle of violence was an inherent flaw in the Roman imperial system that eventually doomed it, or if it was a brutal but ultimately functional mechanism for replacing ineffective or tyrannical rulers, thereby ensuring the long-term survival of the empire. Did this constant pruning prevent stagnation, or did it bleed Rome dry, leaving it vulnerable to external threats? It's a complex and ongoing academic discussion. You, as emperor caught in this cycle, would find yourself constantly on the offensive, not just against foreign invaders, but against the very forces that elevated you to power. You'd be fighting for survival from the moment you put on the purple. Every military victory would bring you closer to a challenge from within your own ranks, and every moment of peace would be filled with the ominous quiet before the next storm. The pressure to constantly prove your worth, both militarily and politically, would be relentless. Think of the reigns of the Severan dynasty. While they provided a period of relative stability, their own rise was born from civil war, and their decline was marked by internal assassinations. You see figures like Caracalla murdering his brother Geta, then being murdered himself. Their successor, Macrinus, quickly met the same fate. This pattern, even within a single dynasty, illustrates how the very act of seizing power through violence often sets a precedent for others to follow, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of instability. The blood spilled to gain the throne seemed to demand more blood in return. The cycle also created a deep-seated militarization of Roman society and politics, with the army being the ultimate kingmakers. Military service became the primary path to influence and power. Senators and civilians often had to curry favor with generals, and even emperors had to constantly flatter and reward their legions. You'd witness the increasing emphasis on military spending, the constant recruitment, and the growing influence of the soldier class in all aspects of Roman life. This wasn't just about defending borders, it was about securing the throne. The Roman fascination with military glory, while a source of strength and expansion, ironically, became a weakness when turned inward. Every victorious general, every popular commander, became a potential threat, a rival for the purple. You'd be celebrating a triumph, the crowds roaring, but in the back of your mind, you'd be wondering if the general leading your legions would soon be leading them against you. It was a constant internal struggle, eroding the bonds of trust and loyalty. This endless cycle of violence made long-term planning incredibly difficult. Emperors often had short tenures, meaning they focused on immediate survival and short-term gains rather than long-term strategic reforms. You'd see emperors trying to appease the army with immediate donatives, or launch quick, popular campaigns to boost their legitimacy, rather than addressing deeper systemic issues. This short-sightedness further contributed to the empire's eventual decline, as crucial problems were often ignored in the frantic quest for self-preservation. Ultimately, the endless cycle of violence was a tragic flaw woven into the fabric of Roman imperial power, the very mechanisms that allowed ambitious individuals to seize control. Military might, political maneuvering, and often outright assassination also ensured that their reigns would be brief and their ends often violent. It was a brutal, self-consuming system, a stark reminder that power gained by the sword often perishes by the sword. And as you drift off, perhaps the quiet stability of your own world can serve as a soothing contrast to the constant, deadly turmoil of Roman imperial life. You've journeyed through the treacherous landscapes of Roman imperial power, from the perilous path to the throne to the endless cycle of violence that often ended a ruler's life. Now, as our historical journey draws to a close, let's consider a legacy of lessons and lullabies. The chaotic ends of these emperors, far from being just bloody footnotes, offer profound insights into the nature of power, human ambition, and the fragile line between glory and ruin. And even in their tumultuous finishes, there's a strange, almost comforting rhythm to these tales as they help you ease into slumber. Imagine looking back at this parade of emperors, some wise, some mad, all ultimately vulnerable. You see a clear pattern emerging: absolute power, while tempting, rarely brought peace or security to its holder. Instead, it magnified flaws, attracted deadly ambition, and often led to a premature, violent demise. It's a powerful historical lesson that transcends time, reminding us of the inherent dangers of unchecked authority. A common historical truth is that the Roman Empire's longevity wasn't due to the stability of its imperial successions, but despite their instability, the resilience of its institutions, its bureaucracy, its legal system, and the underlying strength of its economy allowed it to weather centuries of tumultuous transfers of power. You'd see the empire itself as a vast, enduring entity, capable of absorbing shocks that would have shattered lesser states. The emperors might fall like dominoes, but Rome, in its essence, often endured. Consider the diverse personalities we've encountered, from the philosophical Marcus Aurelius to the deranged Caligula. Each emperor's story, particularly their end, serves as a cautionary tale. You see that good intentions were often no shield against assassination, nor were tyrannical excesses a guarantee of a long reign. The lesson is clear. The throne was a dangerous place, and few left it peacefully, regardless of their character or policies. Their lives, then, become a kind of repetitive historical mantra, a recurring theme that guides you deeper into relaxation. A lesser-known detail, though, is how these tumultuous reigns, paradoxically, contributed to a certain mythology of the strongman leader in Roman popular culture. Despite the clear evidence of how often such leaders fell, the idea of a single, powerful figure who could bring order to chaos remained deeply ingrained. You'd find poets and historians, even in later centuries, lamenting the absence of a true leader. even as the historical record showed such figures rarely lasted long. This lingering ideal, even in the face of brutal reality, is a fascinating psychological insight into human desire for strong leadership. Historians still debate whether these constant shifts in power, born from violence, ultimately weakened the Roman Empire to its breaking point, or if they were, in a twisted way, a form of Darwinian selection, ensuring only the most ruthless and capable survived, even if briefly. Was the instability a symptom of decline, or a grim self-correcting mechanism? The answer likely lies in the cumulative effect, while short-term resilience was often achieved. The long-term drain on resources and trust undoubtedly took its toll. You, looking back, can appreciate the sheer human drama inherent in these narratives. The betrayals, the desperate struggles for survival, the sudden reversals of fortune. They are the stuff of epic tragedy. Each emperor's story, from their meteoric rise to their often bloody fall, is a complete narrative arc, a mini-saga within the larger tapestry of Roman history. These are not just dry facts. They are vivid tales of ambition, power, and mortality. Think about the profound impact of the Praetorian Guard on the very fabric of Roman imperial succession. Their influence, a recurring motif throughout our journey, became a defining characteristic of the Roman system. You see them making and unmaking emperors, their barracks becoming the true seat of power, more so than the Senate House. This lasting legacy of military intervention in civilian rule is a powerful lesson for any society contemplating the balance of power. The constant paranoia that gripped so many emperors, leading them to distrust their closest advisors and family members, serves as a stark warning about the isolating effects of absolute power. You're reminded that wealth and authority, when unbounded, can breed profound loneliness and fear, turning even the most luxurious surroundings into a psychological prison. The purple, while a symbol of ultimate triumph, often came with the unseen chains of suspicion and isolation. The Roman emperors, in their rise and fall, offer us a profound mirror on the human condition. Their struggles with ambition, loyalty, betrayal, and mortality are timeless. You see echoes of their challenges in modern political landscapes, albeit with less overt violence. The underlying dynamics of power, competition, and the desire for control remain eerily consistent. And so, as we close this chapter, let the stories of these emperors, their brief, tumultuous reigns, and their often violent ends, gently guide you into a peaceful slumber. The clatter of Roman armor, the whispers of palace intrigue, the shouts of rebellious legions, let them fade into the background, becoming distant echoes in the quiet of your mind. Their struggle for survival is over, yours is simply to rest.